Hey guys, welcome to another quick episode of Renewed. This is for people that are wanting to get into cars. So if you're already into cars, you can watch if you want, but you really don't need to. I'm going to explain some basics about how your internal combustion engine typically works. Now this is our 1968 Chevrolet C10, and for the most part, these engines work exactly the same way on the internals. Some of the externals are different, and I'll try and show you the differences. So, basically an internal combustion engine is an air pump. That's all it really does, is it moves air from the inlet to the outlet, the exhaust. Basically that's what it does. And it takes that movement, gets transferred into your transmission, and your transmission takes that momentum and turns it into a driving force, basically. So we have some very important things here. In this case, we have an air cleaner. This is an open element style, sits right on top. A lot of other vehicles will have some sort of air induction tube. Usually sits over here, and then there'll be some sort of air filter inside a box you got to take out. Check on those. Okay. This one is a different style. This is a Canon cleanable filter, so this color looks pretty much how it's supposed to look. But normally the air filters are going to be white, or they're going to be kind of a skin tone color. If they have a bunch of dirt on them, or if they are just filled with debris, or they're brown or black, they need to get changed. Okay, and that'll make sense here in a minute. Now in this particular vehicle here, we have a carburetor. And they don't use carburetors anymore. But basically, this just allows the air and the fuel to mix. Now on your modern engines, you have injectors that go right into the cylinders. The injectors inject the fuel, and then you have the air comes from your air filter through your intake manifold into your cylinder heads, which are underneath the valve cover bolts to the cylinder head. Okay. And that air goes through your valves into your cylinders, and the air and fuel typically mix there. Well, on these carbureted ones, they mix in here. Now, your gas pedal, again, on this carbureted model, does not actually, if people say give it gas, it doesn't actually give it gas. Believe it or not, it runs, in this case, a linkage. Most cases are cable, or some of them now are even electronic. But basically all this does, on a carbureted, it does, it does actually give it a little bit of gas. It does run an accelerator pump inside to pump fuel. But most of the time, on a modern engine, all it does is run a butterfly flap. And I'll show you on a different car. So this is a 98 Toyota Corolla I'm putting together after an accident. But in this case, here's your throttle body. This is a 4-cylinder. The truck over there was a V8. So this here is your throttle body system. Okay, air intake tube would be coming out of here, the air box over here. Now these cables here are what basically run your gas pedal. So, or your gas pedal runs the cables, right? So see that butterfly flapperoo? I just run this cable here, and see how that flap opens? That's all your gas pedal does. To a basic extent, sometimes computers and electronics, basically, that's the basics. It just runs that flap. Yeah. back to the old V8. Psst, it's my favorite. Yeah. So, now, we've talked about the air getting into the cylinders, the fuel getting into the cylinders. Inside each, on this V8, there's 8 of them. On a V6, there's 6. On a 4-cylinder, it would be an inline 4-cylinder. There's 4 of them in a row. And basically, in this general area here and here, there are your cylinders. Now, they're inside each cylinder. You have the valves on the head that allow the fuel to go in. They open up at a very specific time to allow the air-fuel mixture in. And you also have, right over here, kind of hard to see. Again, the 4 cylinders are a little different shape, but you have under here your spark plug. See a little white thing? Kind of hard to tell. That's a spark plug in there. So your spark plug, it runs off, in this case, a distributor back there, and that distributes the electricity coming off of a coil that gives a spark at a very specific time. So imagine this fist here is the piston. Okay, you have a rotating assembly at the very bottom of your engine. Okay, very bottom. And that moves this piston up and down. Okay, so this is called a 4-stroke engine. Most cars, I don't even think there's any cars that are a 2-stroke, but like a motorcycle engine or a weed eater or some of those type of engines are a 2-stroke. That's a whole different story. We're not going to talk about those. These are a 4-stroke. We have first stroke as our intake stroke. So as our cylinder, our piston here reaches the very top of the cylinder and it pulls down, the intake valve will open. And that creates vacuum. And it sucks in fresh air and fuel. Okay, sucks it in. And then that piston's coming right back up. And that's called the compression stroke. It's compressing that air and that fuel down from basically a couple inches worth, about 3-inch diameter to, however the size of your piston is in diameter, and then how long the cylinder is, say 6 inches deep, 4 inches deep. It again depends on the size of your engine. It compresses all of that down to about yay big, and about obviously the size of your piston. And so that's the compression stroke. And then your spark plug sparks, and that gives it enough power to push that piston back down, because it ignites that air and fuel mixture, pushes that back down. We call that the power stroke. And then it pushes back up, and your exhaust valve in your head opens, and that allows your piston to push all of that burnt air and fuel mixture out into your exhaust system. And that is basically it for an internal compression and internal combustion engine, Now there is some other various things you need to know. You have a cooling system, a radiator, you have a fan. Most fans nowadays are electric fans. They don't run off your water pump. You have a water pump that's pumping your water around, because inside this engine there is journals basically created to allow coolant to flow through it to keep this from overheating and bad things from happening. So you have a thermostat. It's typically in various locations on the engine, but basically that thermostat allows the coolant to flow back out of the engine into the radiator, where the heat exchanges, cools down, and then goes back through that radiator hose, in this case, through the bottom, or through the water pump, That water pump circulates the whole cooling system and keeps your engine cool. You also have a alternator system. This guy is what keeps your battery charged. So your car does not run off the battery. Your engine doesn't run off it, your radio doesn't run off it, your dash lights, your headlights, none of it actually runs off of it. What it does, when your engine is off, it will run off the battery. So I do say it will run off the battery if your engine is off. Okay. But all this battery does is provide voltage and amperage primarily down to your starter motor. In this case, it's way down there, you can't see it. That starter motor, when you hit the key, sucks this thing down and rotates this engine over until the engine takes off on its own. And then a belt runs off the engine, runs to your alternator, and your alternator actually provides enough juice to not only recharge your battery and power, in this case, coil, but it powers your computer, it powers all your electrical, runs off this guy. So, if you see a little battery icon come up on your dashboard, right, it does not mean, if you're driving, the battery icon comes on. It doesn't mean anything with your battery. It means it's detected a fault in the charging system for your battery. Basically, this guy is on its way out. If that ever happens, recommend you pull over immediately, because if these go out, then it does run off your battery and your battery will drain really quick, and then your car dies in the middle of the road, and that's not good. So, and then when we're talking about our cooling system, even though we're talking about charging system, but now we're talking about our cooling system again. All cars that I know of are going to have two lines coming off somewhere on the engine. In this case, they run off water pump, and one runs off intake. Okay. These are your heater system. Your heater runs off of your cooling system. Coolant goes up, and in this case, your heater core is right here, easy to change. Most vehicles, it's under the dashboard, and it's a nightmare. It's basically a little radiator in there. And your coolant goes up in there, back down, and your blower motor, right there, fan, in this case it's here, in most cases, also under the dashboard, it pulls air across that. And that air heats up, and that's how you get the hot air. Air conditioning systems, that's a whole different nightmare. And I don't have air conditioning, so I can't really show you. So that's your basics of your internal combustion engine. If you have any questions, I particularly know the older stuff. Newer stuff, I know enough. If you have any questions, post them down there below. You know what, guys? Just keep on renewing.